the Sua Sponte podcast. I'm Ken Harper, your host, and I'm here again with Tony Mayne. Today, we're just going to discuss a little bit about the GallantFew and the premise behind it and what it is to help and serve veterans. So, Tony, did you want to just give a brief description of the GallantFew?
Yeah, no problem. And thanks once again, Ken, and the Sua Sponte podcast for having us on. Always a great opportunity to share what's happening in the veteran space. Over 50,000 veteran support nonprofits. It's hard to keep them straight. So hopefully this allows the listeners to put a face with the name of an organization. And the GallantFew exists to provide veterans hope and purpose. And it started out as an organization to serve U.S. Army Rangers, both from the 75th Ranger Regiment and from ARTB, so Ranger qualified soldiers. And over time, it's evolved to be an organization for all veterans who are committed to becoming vet stars. And we call a vet star a veteran who is engaged in self-training and response-ability, right? The desire to be a better person and to also better their community, because you have to want to be both, because we're meant to live in community.
Yeah. So in that, so originally it was pretty much just Ranger tab personnel.
Yep.
And from battalion. But now you've transitioned to all service members. Is that just Army or is that any military branch?
So it's all service members. That's a great question, Ken. And then we'll even work with family members of veterans as well, depending on their situation. So GallantFew was started by Carl Monger. Carl Monger was a 1st Battalion Ranger. And yes, unlike me, he was an NCO first. He's just an officer. But he worked with this guy that a lot of people in our community know, Joe Votel. Some people have heard of this Joe Votel guy down at 1st Ranger Battalion. And so Carl had this very unique experience when he assessed and made it to 1st Ranger Battalion. He did very well as the S1, working directly for Ken Stouse. Right? Ken Stouse would go on during Carl's time to die in the Antelope Lake accident. So he lost one of his mentors while in. That caused a chain of events that included Carl being named as a future company commander and having that taken away. Carl also got to the battalion, had orders to the battalion when the battalion was jumping into Panama. So he comes into the battalion after everybody else has their mustard stains. So you start looking at all of this, and then Carl had a very difficult time dealing with the idea that he would stay on staff. So when, as the S1, and he read the alerts from the Army that there was an early retirement, he took it. He didn't talk to his mentors. He was so frustrated that he just got out. And that experience, years later, Carl was able to recognize, man, not everybody's getting out of battalion for like a good reason, right? Like not everybody leaves. And because of that, because of his caring heart, he started trying to connect and talk to other Rangers. Well, as he's doing that, he's talking to people who matter in our community, who also care, who are also working on ways to help Rangers. People like Sergeant Major Mike Hall, who becomes a board member for GallantFew once it's established in 2010, all the way up till this year. Sergeant Major Hall, whose plate is now pretty full, just left GallantFew's board, but hasn't been a board member. General Dan Allen has been a board member. Command Sergeant Major Jeff Mellinger has been a board member. So this idea of how do we help Rangers who've had a difficult transition was what GallantFew was. It's kind of the crux of all these Rangers who care, the first organization to try to figure out helping folks who didn't have a good transition. Kind of started with GallantFew. Carl decided that he wanted to grow the organization to help everyone, because to know Carl is to know a man who cares about other people. He's now a licensed counselor associate who continues in his career with GallantFew. So he can see people on a clinical one-on-one base. So Carl created an organization called the Darby Project out of GallantFew to kind of look just at the Ranger situation, to kind of keep that going as GallantFew kind of expanded for everyone else. But it started with just Ranger. So I like to say that GallantFew is the Abrams Charter organization, kind of a nonprofit of the Ranger Regiment, right? So if we talk to a Coastie, a Marine, it's because originally we knew we had to take care of our own and do it right. We learned how to do it well, and now we're exporting that to the DoD.
Yeah, we set the standard and then we move it on to a bigger effect. So in that, I asked about you. So you help any veteran or any service member. Is there a rank requirement? Is there a time requirement when they come to you? Is it when they're still in service, or can it be when they're after service?
So it's both active duty and it's veteran. But here's the one thing, the requirement, Ken, they've got to be committed to self-training to boost their responsibility. All right. They've got to want to be a vet star. And yes, that's a branding. So it's crystal clear, because to try to help somebody who's not ready to be helped, who is not responsive, we would spend the majority of organizational energy on those folks. And there are some organizations who exist just to help those individuals. But at any phase, what we're trying to do, and let's talk in-state and why we say vet star and why it's important. A successfully transitioned veteran, or someone who might have had a tough transition but has a hard time with the reintegration, or somebody who's doing fine. The end goal of veterans is exactly our leadership model in Ranger Regiment. More responsibility. And so what does more responsibility mean? For yourself? No, because more responsibility for yourself really means effect on the community. We want folks who are stable in their own lives to then go and make an impact on others. I believe what the Department of Defense gives back outside of warfighting that is not talked about enough, that is not mentioned enough, is what we do in communities for change. Right now, we've seen an absolute decrease in veterans who are in politics, and there's a myriad of reasons kind of behind that. But when we look at who are active and involved in communities, the number of veterans leading those organizations is huge. And so the transition pipeline is something that we want to affect to ensure a good transition for the individual. But that's like 101, right? That's like conventional force stuff, right? Like that's just like stuff you got to do. That should be
basic
ground floor stuff. But when you have somebody who takes what they've learned in the military in terms of teamwork, values, establishing a culture, accountability, and you can bring that to a civic organization, now you have somebody in a civic organization. And why do folks think that person is the way they are? They think it's because of the military. Now you tell me what's better for retention and recruiting of the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
There's nothing better. We mentioned before on a previous episode, Coach Krzyzewski, West Point graduate, Army officer, very successful head coach, maybe the most ever, depending on your fandom. If you like Duke or not. They just used him in a recruiting ad. Wouldn't it be smart to take a retired sergeant first class who started a business, who's doing very well and active in a Big Brothers and Big Sisters? That's what the military does. Because no man, right, no woman, no service member, right, is an island, right? And so that's why in GallantFew, we spend our time with the individual coaching and counseling to get them to a place where they feel confident to take what they've learned in the military and then export that to other folks.
Well, and that's one thing me and Sarng has always talked about is the Abrams Charter or Wickham's Charter is the fact of the original intent is to set the standard on a small scale in battalion so that the whole Army as a whole can take advantage of it, right? That's the black beret, right? Everybody's pissed about losing the black beret and we got a tan beret. I get it, right? We don't want to lose it. That's the black PTs, right? We're the studs running around, Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Moore, or whatever it is now, in the all black PTs with the sexy little PT belt, right? Nobody else had it. Now the big Army, black PTs. Now the big Army probably doesn't know why they got black PTs, but we set that standard as Rangers, is we had the black PTs. And so I think us as Rangers, we go to Ranger School, one of the hardest schools in the military, and learn to be leaders. They run us through patrol phases. You get a go or a no-go, you have to pass in your leadership role. And it doesn't matter if you're an officer or enlisted, you got to run both situations. And like you're saying, I think that civilian organizations are missing out by not taking Rangers and not taking people that go to Ranger School, because we're huge assets to be leaders. We were taught to be leaders, to tell men this is what we need to do and this is how we do it. And the more I think about it, is Abrams Charter doesn't stop in the military.
Amen. Yeah.
It's you don't lose the fact that you went through Ranger School when you leave the military. Like, you should be in a leadership role in civilian society. I didn't want to do it, but I'm a representative for all my guys at work. I got voluntold essentially because they all knew that they could trust me to be in a leadership role. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. I got 2 kids and a wife. I got tons of priorities. I got church, I got things I want to volunteer and help with. And then now I got to help these guys, but they know when it comes down to a situation where they screwed up, one thing I always tell them is to be honest and to do the right thing. And nobody really wants to hear that when we screw up, right? We all want somebody to be like, man, can't you just agree with me and be on my side and feel bad for me? And I think as Rangers, we've been taught not to do that. We've been taught to be honest with one another and to help each other. And so, anyways, I went on a rant there, but
it's all good. It's all good. We've got to show them, and that's what we try to do. GallantFew is pathways for that leadership. It transcends the military into the civilian world, and it doesn't have to be just a community military organization to make your military veteran community bigger. Something that we're looking to evolve is our relationship with veterans and big brothers, big sisters. If you'd ask me what's the biggest problem in America right now, that's a pretty long list. But based on my background and my belief system, it's fatherlessness, right? We're creating children as if we're a cattle farm right now. There's not a lot of thought to that. That is having a negative effect on society, which is bad, but it's more about the negative effect on that human being. Right? It will take people to sacrifice, who are good people, to sacrifice their free time to be with a young man or a young woman who doesn't have a male figure, because males have generally, statistically, and it's a high number, abdicated any responsibility of child rearing. Like there's no money. There's not a dollar sign on that. Nothing fixes that. There's no type of fatherlessness reparation that is going to be like, oh, just give that kid $1 million. What happens when you give people money in the lottery? Over 50% of people lose it all or something inside of 3 years, right? There's nothing that's going to fix it. Tell me who's best equipped in America right now. What group of people could make a difference?
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. So what you'll see in the future with GallantFew is us highlighting individuals, not because what they did in the military, that's an interesting part of the story. It's foundational. But what they're now doing as they move to the mountaintop to help in their communities, right? No one right now is telling other organizations and other people's stories. And so we're very excited as we've just launched that within the next month. And we have several things on the way to kind of expand on it.
Yeah, that's good. That's one thing that we're trying to just give guys life stories of what they do now after the military. I'm a truck driver. Who thought when you're an Army Ranger that you're going to retire and get out and become a truck driver? It doesn't sound cool and sexy, but hey, society needs it. society needs truck drivers. We need fathers. And like you said, there's no money there, but the value, the return on investment is huge because like, I love seeing my kids grow. It's amazing to me. It's something, if you're not a parent, you don't really get to understand until you're there. But
when we counsel veterans, Ken, all right, we start with the end state. Tell me what your life's like when you're 70. I mean, this is military planning. You got to know where you're going to get there, right? Like to develop. And if you get off path, you need to know how to get back on.
Yeah.
But when you're 70, and this is for male veterans, right? And I think we can do the mental math for female veterans, right? Like you're a good father if you had kids. You're a good husband. You're involved in the lives of your family. That's number one, depending on how strong your faith is and what your faith tradition is. I'm a Christian, so number one is relationship with God Almighty, right? Like that's for me. But that's still relational, right? And so number two is father, husband, family. That's all number two, right? So I'm not trying to push faith on people. I'm just saying personal example, right? I don't want to ignore what's true in my life. Well, if that's what it is, does being a truck driver support that? Or do you have to be a ranger and think you have to go get an MBA at Columbia? We have plenty of folks that do that, and that's wonderful, and it's great, and they want to do it, and it fits in their phase of life. But the number one thing you're supposed to do is be in community. Your number one responsibility is your family. Period. Done. End of story. That's what's best for society. There's a book called Blue Zones we've talked about that proves it. Like this isn't right. Don't try to put other variables and other studies around the truth, right? Data and the truth. So if that's where you want to be, well, let's start back from that. See what it looks like, right? You know the number one group of folks who generally make under $100,000 a year that retire as millionaires. You know what group that is, Ken?
No.
Teachers. Because teachers realize if they're in a profession where they're not making a lot of money, the unions that they're a part of all have 401ks run generally by insurance companies, not always. And they are very diligent savers. But if I tell a ranger and I show them ways to make $1 million, they're like, their whole idea is like, well, I don't come from that background. Like I could never have $1 million. I'm like, and I show them teachers do it. Like this is the math. But when you start at I'm 23, what do I do next? You're looking at the wrong part. Yeah. You've got to know where you want to go. And it could be something as broad as I want to be able and go and visit my grandkids. Or if I get married, I want to be able to travel with my wife. Because now you've set a goal in your mind, as arbitrary as it might be, that you know it takes planning and intentional action to get there. And that's what we do with GallantFew. We just show that gap. We present perspectives and show them people that have done it and introduce them to people that want to help them. I don't want to say it's easy. But when you have somebody who's committed, once again, to self-training and responsibility, that's the raw material you need.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I'm reminded of in Ranger School is just that start with the end in mind process of this is my mission. I'm 8 hours out. What are the things I need to do in line successively to make sure that I meet that time hit, that I'm there on time? And that's what you're saying. When you're 70, that's your end goal, whatever. A wife and a kid, a wife and 2 kids. And just what does that look like as the progression? And then I think that's good. Like what you're saying is having that end goal. It's easy to get back on track because you know where you're going rather than just kind of going with things. And then when you get off track, you don't even know you're off track.
All of life becomes a Frago, right? Like there's certain things you should do, right? You should probably grow in whatever your spiritual faith is. That's usually a thing that happens to people over time that grounds values. Like that's a good deal. If you're good with your money, like, and you value that versus material wealth and material things, well, then you have that end goal in mind. That helps you make decisions, right? That helps with relationships. You might actually do something crazy and talk to your significant other about what your goals are. And you decide not to go to Disney this year because of the effects it will have. Or you decide, you know what, we've worked really hard. We're going to Disney this year. It's worth the little bit of sacrifice, right? And then in your profession, I never thought as a knowing what I know about transition, going through the medical board, having a master's degree, I did not think I'd ever work for a nonprofit. That was never in the cards for me because I felt the pressure of being a ranger officer. I would go get an MBA, right? I would go work in industry. There was an income I was supposed to make, right? Luckily, with everything we're doing here in Columbus, Georgia, with the support of St. Luke Church, having GallantFew's headquarters here in Georgia, putting some other things together, I started looking at what do I like to do? Like, what are my talents? A lot of people will find a purposeful job. Well, if the purpose is to take care of my family, I realized, well, if that's number one, there's not ever going to be a perfect for that because any job's going to take me away from my family. And I'm not saying I tried to find good enough, but I started maybe the purpose wasn't aligned just in career. Now, I did hit a grand slam, so don't get me wrong. Well, what I get to do every day, that I know there are people who would pay to take my job if they saw what I got to do every day. Four couples, 2 couples, 2 other Rangers, another veteran came in yesterday. And I told them, every single one of them that I was talking to counseling, I said, who's having the best day today? I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. This is going well for us. I said, no, I'm having the best day. I'm doing what I want right now. And it's helping you. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity when it's not all about yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. So guys, if you have anything you want to reach out to Tony or anybody at GallantFew, they have a website. You can hit them up, or you can reach out to us at Sua Sponte. That's what we're here for. We're here as a resource to try to help guys transitioning out of battalion into the civilian world. And Tony, I really appreciate your time that you took to work with us today and just record this. And like we always say here, Rangers lead the way.
All the way, Ken.